Welcome to the Debrief, everyone. Let's begin with a check of national legal headlines. Actor Bill Cosby expecting to serve his entire 10-year sentence for sex assault, despite the chance he could have gotten out of prison after 3 years. Cosby told BlackPressUSA.com he will not tell the parole board he has remorse, that people who weren't present for his interactions with his accusers don't know the whole truth, that his trial was a setup, and that his jurors were imposters. One juror who said Cosby was guilty remained on the jury despite a defense objection. Cosby also said his conviction was racially motivated and that he believes too many fellow African Americans are behind bars. A third arrest in the suspected death of the daughter of a UFC fighter. Aniah Blanchard disappeared October 23rd, and authorities are waiting for official confirmation that remains which turned up 20 minutes east of Montgomery, Alabama, are indeed hers. Ibrahim Yazid is charged with kidnapping Blanchard. Antoine Fisher is charged with providing transportation and disposing of evidence. David Johnson Jr., the third arrest, he's charged with hindering prosecution. President Donald Trump has signed a federal law which criminalizes additional forms of animal abuse. Former federal law criminalized the selling of videos of animal fighting and cruelty. The new law, called the PACT Act, criminalizes the crushing, burning, drowning, suffocating, impaling, or sexual exploitation of animals at the federal level. The penalty is up to 7 years in prison. Now to the trial of a Florida man accused of killing his wife and business partner. Marc Sievers is charged with being the ringleader behind the murder of Dr. Teresa Sievers. A colleague found Dr. Sievers beaten to death with a hammer inside her own home. Husband Marc Sievers is the one on trial right now. Co-defendant Curtis Wright pleaded guilty and testified against both the husband and the third co-defendant, Jimmy Rogers. Rogers is in prison after a second-degree murder conviction earlier this year. A Sheriff's Department lieutenant testified that the reason the two friends went along with the husband's alleged murder plot was because the husband promised them a cut of Dr. Sievers' life insurance policies.
You had confronted him about the possibility of a failing marriage between Mr. and Dr. Sievers, correct?
That's one of the themes I went over.
Okay. And the other was you had a theory that this was something that was done for life insurance. Is that correct?
That's one of the themes.
Okay.
I don't recall having any kind of data in hand. I knew that there was life insurance, but at this time, in speaking with Mr. Wright, it was one of the things that I used as a theme. And when I say theme, to explain it better, when I'm trying to help Mr. Wright look at all the possibilities in front of him, I went over different themes, and that was one of them, meaning different reasons why things happen.
Do you recall that interview being even more focused than your July 12, 2015 interview?
Yes, because at that time we actually had a warrant for his arrest.
Okay. And do you recall at that time advancing a theory that Jimmy was going to be paid $10,000?
I don't recall saying a sum of money.
Okay, you don't recall that with any specificity?
No.
Curtis Wright, of course, is the co-defendant who cooperated with the state. Here is how he explained from the witness stand how the money would flow.
I had asked him about, if this was going to happen, what kind of money would be available. So he had told me that it was that they had a lot of insurance on her. A lot is what he said. He didn't tell me any amounts, but he said that there was a lot of insurance, that him and the kids would be well taken care of, and that he had at least $100,000 to offer to have it done.
So, Mr. Sievers was he offering you $100,000 to kill Dr. Sievers, or was he offering $100,000 to whoever did it?
Well, he if it wasn't going to be me personally, I was going to be the middle person. So he didn't want, if there was someone else involved, he didn't want him to know who he was.
So you were going to get $100,000,
yeah,
and then maybe subcontract out the
yes,
killing.
yes. The specifics of how that would be given we didn't talk about.
The state says Wright and Rogers drove to Florida in a rental car to commit the crime. A friend testified that he loaned Wright his GPS and ultimately didn't get it back.
Did you at some point lend him a Garmin to use?
Yes,
And why did you lend him a Garmin?
he didn't have one.
And did he have trouble finding places without it?
Do I?
No, did he?
Uh,
Why did he ask you if he could borrow your Garmin?
I think he's just going to program all the places he goes and where he's been and that. Way I understood when he kind of had a short-term memory on things.
Did there come a point when you asked him if he would return your Garmin?
Yes.
And did he return it at that point?
No.
Did you all have a conversation about him returning the Garmin?
Yes. He just asked if he could keep it because he had just trips that he's made, which he made several, on his Garmin, and that he had it all programmed, and if I would just go ahead and get another one, and he would work it off, pay it off that way.
And did you agree for him to do that?
Yes, I did.
Did the co-defendants fear that the GPS device would tell investigators precisely where they had been? Here's what authorities learned after they actually did examine that device.
Was there any information from the plots within that Garmin unit that indicated whether or not the Garmin unit had been in the vicinity of the Walmart on 6 Mile Cypress?
There were on the Garmin device itself, not on the data, I believe, that we received from Garmin USA.
And once you found those specific plots for that Walmart within the Garmin, did you communicate that to the detectives?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall the vicinity of these gas stations that were searched for or located within the Garmin unit?
One was in Brooksville, Florida. One was in Bushnell, Florida.
And did you make any attempt to figure out whether the Brooksville gas station and the Bushnell gas station had been recovered as part of that sweep that the sheriff's office did along I-75?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to locate well, maybe not locate, but were you able to determine that video from the racetrack and from the Shell station in Brooksville and Bushnell had been obtained by the sheriff's office?
Yes, the video from 2 locations had already been recovered.
And at Walmart is where authorities say the defendants were buying those suspicious items. Remember that. And there was also this testimony about why cooperating defendant Curtis Wright was suddenly not involved with a church.
Just briefly, you said that when you met Mr. Wright, he was assistant youth director at your church. Is that correct?
Yes.
He was asked to resign from that position, wasn't he?
Pardon?
He was asked to resign from that position, wasn't he?
I still don't understand it.
He was asked to resign from that position, wasn't he?
Well, I think him and the youth director both resigned at the same time. It was a mutual agreement with the church and them.
Okay. And do you recall the conditions under which Mr. Wright resigned?
There was some turmoil with some of the parents. They didn't like the way they were trying to teach the younger people.
Okay. Do you recall if there were specifically any allegations made against Mr. Wright?
No, the only thing that I knew at the church at that time where we kind of upset the apple cart with it was that they took the children downtown to the homeless and showed them how the homeless people were living on the streets. And a lot of parents got very upset with that situation.
Attorney Adam Konta is with us tonight here on the Debrief. So Adam, what is the relevance of this testimony about what Wright is up to with church and whether the church community feels as though he's properly educating the youth of the church? What is the defense trying to go at here?
I think they're trying to go that he's a bad decision maker, that he's someone who does not have the capacity to think like a rational adult, who can take things out of context, and when given the opportunity, whether it's be trusted with children or be trusted with perhaps a joke about the ending the life of someone's wife, that he's not a reliable person.
In other words, that he just took things into his own hands and ran away with it and actually committed an act that the defendant didn't really want him to commit?
Exactly.
Is that a stretch based on the other evidence here?
Well, yeah, it's a stretch, but I think any defense on this case is going to have a bit of a stretch. There's such a linear motive in the life insurance and the flow of that money that they have to poke holes where they can, and I think their options are pretty limited. So if they can attack his credibility, if they can attack his prior past decision making, that might be all they have to hang on to.
You know, it concerned me that the lieutenant said, well, I don't have data. I developed this theme that there was money. I was advancing a theory, and the lieutenant advances this theory. And then Wright, who gets up there with some degree of immunity, not a lot, but some, says, oh, yeah, I asked what money would be available. We didn't get into specific amounts, at least $100,000. There weren't specifics. But so does the defense just get up there in closings and say this was a police theory that then this other defendant adopted, thinking, oh, if I disagree with this, I'll get away with things?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible. You've got someone who's facing the death penalty for these murders. And instead of facing the death penalty, he has a 25-year sentence. That sounds like a lot of time, and it certainly is. I'm certainly glad I don't have to serve that time. But compared to dying or the rest of his life in prison, he got a heck of a deal here. So now he's got to earn it. And so the defense can absolutely say, listen, he's just singing for his supper, so to speak. He's saying exactly what the prosecution gave him the benefit of that sentence, and now he's saying exactly what they want him to say.
And still ahead tonight here on The Debrief, we are sticking with the trial of Marc Sievers after the break. A recap of key testimony as the prosecution begins to wrap up its case. Is there enough evidence to convict the husband, or does the key evidence mostly point to the co-defendants? We are back now to the trial of husband Marc Sievers and the death of his wife, Dr. Teresa Sievers. Co-defendant Curtis Wright testified that Marc Sievers asked him to kill the wife because the wife was having an affair. Here is how Wright says he and his third co-defendant actually did the deed.
On the hammer, and I hit her.
When you hit her, did you expect, what was your expectation when you hit her with the hammer?
I expected it to knock her out.
It didn't knock her out, did it?
No.
It's a little more difficult than you thought it would be?
I've never hit anybody with a hammer before.
How many times did you hit Dr. Sievers with that hammer?
3. She was looking at me through her arms, and she said, why?
She said, why?
Yeah.
To you?
Yes.
And then you said Mr. Rogers came from somewhere and he started hitting her. What did he do?
Just started hitting her over and over.
How would you describe how he was hitting her?
In a frenzy.
A frenzy?
She turned more into the kitchen and bent over. It seems like she had a hand on the countertop. After she was down on the floor, he continued to hit her.
And at some point, did Mr. Rogers stop hitting Dr. Sievers with the hammer?
Yes, I'd ask him to stop.
After that brutal attack, an employee who worked for Dr. Teresa Sievers testified that she could not get a hold of the doctor, so she called the husband, the defendant.
What time was her first visit scheduled for?
9 a.m.
And was it normal for Dr. Sievers to have visits scheduled at 9 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And did she make those 9 a.m. visits or 9 a.m. appointments?
Yes.
Did she make this 9 a.m. appointment on June 29th?
No, sir.
And was it normal for her to miss an appointment like that?
No, sir.
When she missed the appointment, what did you do?
I tried calling her.
And when you tried calling her, does she have like a cell phone or a house phone you were trying to call her on?
Cell phone.
Her cell phone? Did you get a hold of her on her cell phone?
No, sir.
When you were unable to make contact with Dr. Sievers, what did you do?
I called Marc Sievers.
And the same gentleman with the pink tie you identified earlier?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to get a hold of Mr. Sievers?
Via text.
And when you got a hold of him, did you tell him that Dr. Sievers hadn't arrived at work yet?
Correct.
And did he respond?
Yes.
And how did he respond?
Text.
And what was his response?
That he could not get a hold of Dr. Sievers either.
And remember, it was another colleague who actually found the doctor. Let's look now at some of the physical evidence. A former manager of co-defendant Jimmy Rogers testified about a pair of coveralls. The manager said Rogers wore that type of garment at work, and that Rogers said he was in Florida at the time of the killing.
And are these suits required to be worn by employees?
Yes, sir, they are.
How do they get the suits?
Delren issues the suits as you come into or getting ready to go into the plant. There is a area where you can get clean uniforms to put on.
And how many, is there a daily allotment or a daily quota of suits that an employee can get?
No, sir.
Is there any other equipment in addition to the respirator that the employees would wear with the blue suits?
Latex gloves are worn underneath leather gloves. On occasion, some people will use duct tape to duct tape the sleeves and the pants legs of the uniforms down tight to make sure no contaminants actually go up inside the coveralls.
Now, while you were supervising Mr. Rogers at the Doe Run facility, did he ever inform you that he was taking a trip out of town?
Yes, sir, he did.
Where did he tell you he was going and for what purpose?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
He told me that he was going to Florida to visit his brother who had recently graduated law school, and they were going to celebrate the fact that he had graduated law school. This was the gentleman on the roofing crew that he was to meet that Monday morning to work with that crew. This is the text that Jimmy had sent me back saying I'm in Florida still.
We talked about Walmart a couple of minutes ago. A law enforcement witness got up on the stand and said records from that Walmart indicate the defendants purchased some items which, in hindsight, might seem awfully suspicious.
I did see some items that they were able to select, which was a t-shirt, and I knew that they picked some shoes, and I was able to obtain a receipt as well of the items that were purchased at that time.
What kind of t-shirt did they get?
There were 2 items of clothing that would be t-shirts. One at the time I went, which was months later, was already sold out. The other t-shirt was a red Budweiser t-shirt that was selected off the rack.
And what kind of shoes did they get?
There were a pair of water shoes that was also sold out at the time I went back. But there was a pair of black, what I would describe as work type shoes.
Any wet wipes or trash bags?
Yes, sir. They also selected trash bags, wet wipes, a black backpack. They selected a toolkit screwdriver set. There was approximately 8 items or so, 7 or 8 items.
And now to cross-examinations in the Sievers trial. Here, the defense questioned a detective who gathered evidence.
Is it fair to say that, given all of your training, experience, and education, that you tend to be very conscientious and detail-oriented when collecting evidence?
I do my best, sir.
Okay. But would you have used some type of protective gloves so that your biological material would not transfer onto the items of evidence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you collected these samples, were you doing any type of analysis, or was it your job just merely to collect, package, and send?
Yes, sir.
So I kind of asked you a yes or no question. I'll try that again. Is it fair to say that in the course of this investigation, your job was to collect, package, and send?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Ross asked you about some blue gloves found with coveralls. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Were there any blue gloves found or collected with coveralls to your knowledge?
They were provided by Doe Run as exemplars.
Okay, so the blue gloves were sample gloves, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But there were no blue gloves then that were found?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
Okay, there was also this cross-examination about evidence recovered from the car the suspects are accused of using to travel to the scene where they say, or at least one of them says, they killed Dr. Sievers.
Did you find any cat or dog hair matching the pets in the rental car?
I didn't do the testing, so you'd have to ask the analyst.
Okay. You said that the DNA evidence from the vehicle, you said it was blood, is that correct?
It was a presumptive test for blood.
Okay, so the blood from the car did not match any of the known samples, is that correct?
That's not what I said.
Okay, what did you say?
The profile wasn't good enough to compare. So there was not enough markers there to compare to people.
Okay, and DNA markers, they call those loci, is that correct?
Yes.
And we didn't have enough loci to confirm whether or not that blood came from any of those individuals, is that correct?
I think I would need to read that section of the DNA report if you want exactly what they said about the DNA.
Did you find any evidence from the rental car into the residence?
Not that I'm aware, I do not think so.
Did you find any trace evidence from the residence into the rental car?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as she did not conduct the analysis on what was found in the car, and so this really is outside the scope of her knowledge.
Sustained.
Okay, let's bring attorney Adam Konta back into the discussion here. Let's talk about trial advocacy here. It seems to me the defense was trying to make a couple of points here, but the witnesses were owning the defense attorney rather than the other way around. Was there another way to do that?
Yeah, stay away from him. I think a common problem for defense attorney is that they think they have to ask more questions. They think they need to talk to every witness. Think about what you want for your closing, get what you need for that closing, and then get out. It's fine if plenty of witnesses you say no questions, because maybe they don't have anything to offer you. And if they don't have anything to offer you, then you find yourself asking questions you shouldn't be asking, and you find yourself with answers that just make you look like you weren't prepared.
My trial advocacy professor used to say cross-examination is like collecting gold coins. You collect a few, you make your argument, and you don't look in places where there tend not to be gold coins. So we have 3 witnesses tomorrow before the holiday, 5 more on Monday. Then the state will rest. The defense starts. They may bring Wright back. Big question, is the defendant himself going to testify? Do you think he should?
I think they're going to have a heavy decision to make over the weekend, and I would guess that they genuinely don't know yet. But I think that there's a high probability that he will.
Wow, that's an interesting prediction. I will have to hold you to it because he might get up there and say, oh yeah, I made these comments and then they ran away with it. I didn't mean for this to happen, but will the jury believe it? Appreciate the insight from you, Adam. Glad to have you here on The Debrief. That's all the time we have. We'll be back here tomorrow one last time before Thanksgiving. We'll see you at 5 o'clock.